Good morning and welcome to another Daily Devotions with Pastor Joe. I am Pastor Joe, and I'd like to continue this morning in our reading from Esther, chapter 2, beginning with verse 11. It says, "And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house, to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now when every maid's turn was come to go in to the king Ahasuerus, after she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months of sweet odours, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai's the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and he made a release to the provinces, and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred, nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king." And this is a very, very important passage in the life of Esther. So we see Mordecai walked every day. Why? Because he wanted to know how Esther was doing and what would become of her. He cared about Esther. He cared about what he was doing here. Now it's been 12 months. I had said a month earlier, but it was actually 12 months that they stayed for what they called purification of the women, where they had a period of time where they went through some ritual of giving them oil of myrrh and sweet odors and other things, purifying them, so that they could be ready for the king to be pure and new and fresh for him. And whatever she desired was going to be given to her to come into the king's house. So she could have had any jewelry, any perfume, any makeup, anything she wanted. She could have worn exactly the clothes she wanted. And she said, you know what? I've grown to trust Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the person who has been in charge of me this whole 12 months. Whatever you say, I will wear. I will do. I'm sure a lot of the other women said, oh, an opportunity to wear gold, an opportunity to wear these pearls, an opportunity for this expensive perfumes and makeup. And so they took it, right? But Esther was a very simple girl and said, hey, whatever you say, I'm going to trust. She was a very obedient girl. It says later on in this passage, she obeyed Mordecai as she had all of her life. And now we see here she's obeying the Haggai, the king's chamberlain. And so she was a very careful and very obedient girl. We can see that in Esther right here. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in the 10th month, Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, and the king loved Esther. He thought she was an absolute knockout, like I'd said before. She was the best of the best, and who knows how many of these women had come into the king. Who knows how many of these women he had seen, and Esther was everything he wanted. So much so, it says, he came over and put the royal crown on her head and made her queen right there. He said, you know what? This is the one. Then the king made a great feast, gave out all these gifts, and Mordecai, now being the uncle of, cousin of Esther, was sitting in the king's gate, Esther hadn't shown off, once again, that same mistake that we talked about earlier. They're being deceitful, and it ends up coming back to bite them later. But so far, she had not shown that she was an Israelite. She had not shown that to them. But in those days, Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Two of the chamberlains, two of the guys or people who were in charge of different affairs of the king throughout the castle, the house of the king. These two were very upset, probably because the girls that they had prepared didn't win, and they were very angry, and they sought to lay hands on the king. So basically they said, we'll overthrow him, we'll change all of this, we're going to kill him, and it'll be all over with, and we'll take over the kingdom. But Mordecai realized this. He overheard the conversation, or somebody else did, and brought it to him. And you know what? Now God had set Esther up in place so that Mordecai could pass the word to Esther, to pass the word to the king, to protect the king's life. So we already see here that Esther had been serving a purpose for the Lord even at this point, because Ahasuerus ends up being very important and vital in this story later on. But right now we see especially that Esther was put into such a place as this for this very purpose, as we say, for such a time as this. She's there for a reason. And Mordecai tells Esther. Esther tells the king and says it was in the name of Mordecai. And then whenever the inquisition was made of the matter and they tested and found out, yes, it's true, they maybe set a spy in the midst of the two. They found out for sure, yes, these guys really do mean to harm the king. So the punishment, of course, was being hanged on a tree. And it was written in the Chronicles of the King. So basically, all of the kings back in those days, they had a book of chronicles of their life. They had this book that basically went through and told everything, the whole story of their kingship. This king was no different. This book ends up being very important later on, and Mordecai's name wouldn't have been in this book, which ends up being important later on. The king would have ended up being killed because obviously the king would have picked somebody's girl, and it wouldn't have been either Bigthan's or Teresh's. So if one of them was still angry enough to kill the king, then he would have been killed. And on top of that, just so many things that we're going to see here a little later on. Esther was here for a very special purpose, for a very special plan from the Lord. Even though God isn't mentioned by name in this book, his work is mentioned plenty of times. So I'd like to encourage you today to just take some time to go over the life of Esther in your mind. And if you're driving, or if you're relaxing at home, or if you're out working, think about this. Think about Esther. Just remember how she was very obedient. Remember how she was very simple, and she didn't try for extravagance. Just remember that those are a couple of the qualities that God finds very important and very attractive in a human being. And so I'd recommend you try to practice focusing on those in your own life. And just in everything through this day, remember that the Lord has a plan and a purpose for your life, and you are where you are for a purpose right now. Have a great day in the Lord. May God bless you richly through the day. Like, comment, share, subscribe to this, share this video, subscribe to my channel. Meet me again here tomorrow for another daily devotion with Pastor Joe. Thanks again.